Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. I am Shreya Agrawal and you are watching a special dispatch on Mint CX Conversations. In today's episode, we're going to deep dive on what essential customer service looks like in 2022. Before I go on discussing this with this distinguished panel, let's do some context setting of the same. The COVID 19 pandemic has forced businesses to recalibrate how their operations happen. Chief marketing officers of organizations had to figure out the correct strategies to pivot in real time in the face of the pandemic, with economic conditions being decimated, budgets being slashed, and how the consumers were also dealing with this crisis. With this digitization dominating markets and companies facing unprecedented changes, customer experience actually became integral, and marketing campaigns had to be evolved to become even more precise, targeted, and personalized because campaigns that were targeted towards the masses and which had a one size fits all feature were no longer bringing in the desired sales for organizations. And so, intending to optimize their marketing approaches with conceptualized books to respond to dynamic perceptions, consumer data had to be leveraged at the micro level. The importance of mapping a good customer journey when it comes to customer satisfaction and loyalty is key. Brands need to be vigilant towards how their many channels are contributing to this experience. Now, this wave of digitization allowed for a personal connection between companies, consumers, and its crowded digital landscape. The questions really posed by a lot of people were, and the consumers, how can I interact with my customers more efficiently, better than my competitors? What can I offer them better than the rest to entice them to my offerings? In the face of this pandemic and this recalibration, digital channels into the primary method to build rapport and connection with the customer. They took the limelight and became the backbone of customer experience. Now, at the right place and the right time, specific customers can receive astute communication from organizations. Organizations have started adopting personalization for consumers, ranging from product design to outreach, and set forth some benchmarks to facilitate robust personalized interaction among their customers. The question really is that customer data coupled with data from external sources when it comes to engagement means that enterprises have a chance to not only optimally engage with their consumers and satisfy their evolving needs and expectations, but also figure out and predict what they need in the future and what kind of products and services customers may like that they haven't encountered yet. Now that's the time to get to customization. That's the time to get personal. In 2022, what does customer service really mean for a company's growth? To break it all down, please help me welcome Apurva Anand from MobiQuick, Prasenjit Mukherjee from Team Computers, Bhushan Kulleri from Z Entertainment, Gulshan Kaushik from Bizongo, and Vasudeva Ramulnari from Zendesk. I think it would be a good idea to begin with an open-ended question. I'll begin with you, Apurva, in alphabetical order. Consumer expectations make for an ever changing landscape. How did the COVID 19 pandemic really solve customer experiences and customer service as a business function? And what has been the attitude of enterprises towards it in terms of allocation of resources?
Thank you, Shrija, for the question. So I think, Shrija, just as you gave the introductory note, our experience has been somewhat similar. Now, what exactly happened during COVID? People became more prudent with their money, their spending habits, their behavior in the way they were managing money. That went through a complete change. So what we noticed was that, of course, we were the kind of questions that we were getting. Of course, we kept getting those kind of questions, but uh, we started getting a lot of intelligent questions from our users. So much so that we had to really spend a lot of time and energy in training our customer support team. So what we did at this point of time is that we had to actually understand the kind of questions that were coming in. So I think they were a lot more detailed. People wanted to know more. They had far more expectations from the customer support team. They were not looking for just a customary cosmetic solution to their problems, but they wanted to understand more. So we spent a lot of time training our staff and educating them, spending more time in revamping their skills. So I think that was a very key part for us to understand how COVID-19 actually impacted this function in our organization.
So, what really were the questions asked? You said the customers were asking different kind of questions because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, what really was the customer insight that you got, which you escalated back into the product?
See, they wanted to understand more about. So the questions that earlier they had, they were, you know, uh, very basic questions. But right now, what they wanted to know more was that what are people like? How are people spending money? And if there were questions, they wanted to spend more time to understand from our customer support team that exactly what is how much, like, they wanted to know a little bit more about our system. So earlier they were, it was more like they wanted to get the answers that they were looking for, and then the questions would end. But right now they even wanted to understand more about us. More, I think, in more interestingly, we also noticed a change in the demographics. So we had a lot of senior people coming into the system, and who wanted to understand more about how safe the payments are, how safe digital payments are. And I think that was a very key thing for us to understand. So what we did post that is that we spent a lot of time sort of in over educating uh, our users. So wherever we could find a little bit more space and educate them more, we wanted to give more information upfront. So we did not leave anything to their discretion, to their understanding. But wherever you get an opportunity to interact with the user and make him understand more about the product, about product education, we were trying to do that.
Thanks for that, Apurva. I think what I understand from your conversation really is that building trust in a synthetic environment became difficult because the COVID-19 situation, touch was taboo. Your customers wanted to know more about you. And like you mentioned, you were spending your energies in over educating them about are digital payments safe, about your organization. So really it all boiled down to trust. And how do you build trust over a computer screen? How do you build trust over that Zoom call? How do you build trust in a synthetic environment? Now, these are very important questions to be asked. How do you build trust and actually ensure customer experience and environment is so synthetic and everything is so digital? Uh, I would like to also get Vasu's point of view because from a Zendesk perspective, it becomes interesting to understand how do they manage to do this. But first, I would want to hear from all the practitioners here as to how they took stab at something as important as this, establishing trust. Uh, so that is a pretty important question. Gulshan, you want to take a stab at that. Establishing trust in a synthetic environment, what really were the key challenges that you faced? Making sure that you communicate consistently with your customers, number one. And secondly, you're also making sure that your customer experience remains intact or perhaps only becomes better in those times.
Yeah, thanks, Traja. I think it's really an important point, and whenever we understand customer experience or a customer success or a customer service, the most important point is always the building the trust in the entire ecosystem. In case if we just talk about how exactly COVID impacted the entire market and the entire industry, is first that wherever we had always a touch base with the customer, a face-to-face touch base with the customer, which we lost, and that was one thing which was very very important to rebuild over a Zoom call or over a Hangout call, right? As you mentioned that seeing a computer screen and then looking at the trust factor in the same way was a bit difficult, right? um, no, I think into any omni channel or into any other customer success operations, whenever we look at it, we really need to understand what problem customer is actually going through, right? And the set of problems were very different in the COVID times, and the set of problems which used to exist before the COVID time, right? And Bizongo actually stood up and tried understanding that what was the major challenges, right? As Apoorv mentioned, that people were they were intelligently spending their money. They really wanted to make sure that how does the ecosystem help each other, right? So we actually went ahead and tried understanding the entire ecosystem in this case, right? We were earlier a packaging platform which was operating into the packaging space, but after COVID, we actually went industry agnostic. We tried understanding that if there is a supply chain problem which exists in packaging, there would be a similar set of problem which exists in the entire supply chain, right? So we started reaching out our customer and started understanding that what exactly is their problem, right? So if I may take an example, right? Understanding the entire supply chain for the entire ecosystem is like, let's say we are operating into textile, right? Now, RMG players are our direct customers, right? We interact with them. We understand that how do they operate, what exactly is their challenge. But whenever they introduce us to their suppliers, right, it is the entire ecosystem. So RMG manufacturer actually buy or procure from the contract manufacturer, right? A contract manufacturer buys the fabric from a fabric manufacturer, right? A fabric manufacturer buys yarn from a yarn manufacturer, and then they buy cotton to produce yarn. They buy cotton from a cotton mill, right? So in the entire ecosystem, there are similar set of problem which actually COVID brought, was the scarcity of supply chain financing, right? People were very kind of they were their payments actually got stopped, their ecosystem got stopped, and Bizongo actually took up and stood up as a supply chain financing partner at that point in time for the entire ecosystem, with the digital adoption, right? And not only that, we are a financing partner, but we brought digital vendor management, which actually brought the entire visibility in the ecosystem. So two problems which we actually could solve, just to summarize. One was people were with short of working capital. They were not able to do and run their businesses at that point in time, right? We went ahead and partnered with multiple NBFCs, created value for our customers, their partners, their vendors, and then for the entire ecosystem. Brought only brought the working capital financing solution for them through the supply chain financing value offering which Bizongo has, and we brought a digital vendor management which actually created the entire transparency in the entire supply chain, right? So to build trust, it is very important to be transparent. So the platform talks about that how do you procure, what exactly is the order with you, how do you if the order has reached to you, can you digitally accept it? There is an EPUD which is available on the product. Customer accepts it. The moment he accepts it, the payment gets triggered, right? So in the entire process, there were two problems which were very relevant. One was bringing transparency and bringing the entire ecosystem into through one particular platform. So we solved that through our digital vendor management, and then as you and Apoor were mentioning, that there were working capital challenges. So partnering it with multiple NBFCs and going out to our partners and our customers was one big help, for our organization and for our customers and partners. So I think
Thanks
these
for
are
that.
yeah.
Thanks for that, Gulshan. That was pretty elaborate. And what I can understand, I was sort of taking down notes while you were speaking, was that through the vendor management, what you essentially did was that you got your entire customers under one fold, and you mentioned the word transparency. So I'm hearing these words: trust, transparency. We are here, we have all congregated to really talk about customer experience. Vasu, I come to you now. You heard from both these companies who are on the other side of sort of what you do. They're running businesses. One is a mobile payments company, other is a logistics supply chain, and they partnered with NBFC financing, and they solved for that. Both of them talked about that their main challenges but really about establishing transparency, trust, and seeing how they could solve for those digitally. So what I'm understanding is that after the post-COVID situation, if even if we can say so, there's this amazing rise of the community. There's this rise of the community. People trust each other. People want transparency and trust. And second, perhaps there's a rise of a more conscious consumer. This consumer is asking more questions, tougher questions. They want to know more and more about the person whom they're doing business with. So, if I were to ask you, being somebody who advises companies in customer experience, what really are the characteristics of this post COVID consumer? Define that post COVID consumer for me.
Okay, so a very interesting question actually, and I agree with both Bhushan and Kaushik. When they spoke uh, about trust and transparency, and that's a very important aspect. And in any relationship, for it to be more successful, transparency is the most important one, and most important aspect. And transparency establishes trust. So if I were to look at the consumer, the consumers before pandemic and after pandemic, the expectations of the consumers have grown multifold, right? So immediately in the year when we were in the pandemic, all of us were in the same boat. The companies, the brands, and us as consumers were all in the same boat, because we knew that we are looking at an event which is unprecedented, which is unexpected, unplanned, and no business, no individual was planned for it, right? So when the companies were not able to deliver to the expectations of the consumer, they understood that. They said that we understand it's something which has caught all of us off guard. So they were not prepared. We are not prepared. So a bit of a delay here, a bit of a information delay or a delivery delay, whatever it is, we understand that. But then when it got into the next year, right, the consumers' expectations have remained there, and they expected the companies to reciprocate now. And I would want to coin that word called pandemic patience, right? They said that we have lived with this non compliance, or the delays that the companies could have had. But 1 year was a good time for the companies to be able to upgrade and be able to be available to me in the channels of my choice, at a time of my choice, and from the confines of my choice, right? So they expect the companies to reciprocate that. They expect the companies to come and say that, okay, you want to interact with me on, let's say, an Instagram or through a Facebook or through a WhatsApp. You please be available to me on those channels, right? The the and what it also means, like, it's not that the companies are left behind, are behind this. They realize this fact. And if you see the number of brands that are available for customer service through WhatsApp, I mean, it's growing dramatically. You see the amount of companies that have got their presence on Facebook or on a Twitter or on a Instagram. It's increased dramatically. But the aspect is, while there is investment going on here, is the customer looking at the same thing or not, right? While there's investment going on here, the customer still feels that there's a lot more that's pending from their side to be done, because what the customer is expecting for the beyond is, do they know me? And when I say do they know me is, if I come across various channels, are they able to make sense that it's the same Vasu who's coming from Instagram versus the same guy who's coming through an email, right? Do they know me in terms, do they know what are my last few transactions that I've done with this company? And what are my last few issues? What are the offers that have been offered to him in the last few months or few days? Which can the person who's interacting with me on the other side is able to understand me and able to deliver this message out? And that is what I meant by transparency. Because, and second thing is, I should not, as a consumer, I should not be repeating again and again to the same to the agent or to the company, irrespective of where I'm coming from. And again, it is a number of times I'm coming back on the same issue. So the consumers have become more impatient, and they're expecting a lot more from the company to be delivered. And a couple of statistics I want to say, which based on our CX Trends report, which I would like to share here with everybody, is 88% of Indian businesses see that there is a link between experience, customer experience, and business performance. Whereas the flip side is the customers don't see it. 85% of the customers feel that the customer service is still an afterthought, right? At one side, you see investments growing, but the other side, you see that the expectations of the customers are still so high that they think that the investment is not right yet. That's what I would like to
That
leave this
was
part.
that was pretty interesting, and you coined that term pandemic patience, and I like that. That customers' expectations have increased manifold, and they want to understand that do you know me? So this me factor that you spoke about. So there are many me's that all of us are catering to, and my question really is, Vasu, that you are seeing this huge trend of digitization that really is happening. The COVID-19 pandemic completely catapulted digital transformation, and it got a different meaning altogether.
Right.
3 years of digitization actually came into 6 months. And
Absolutely.
because everybody, techno solutionism was what all of us, we were looking technology for all solutioning happening in our lives. So my question really is that when there's so many, now you have MobiQuick, you have Bizongo, all of them from a distance to me look the same. Because when I go and interview them, they tell me the three things. Shrija, we have great investors on board, we have great technology, and we have great customer experience. So, from a distance, if all of these three are speaking in the same language, that great tech that I have great customer experience, how do you distinguish what really are the moats when it comes to customer experience? How can customer experience be such that it is absolutely my moat? I mean, can you establish that moats or competitive advantages in customer experience is a larger question. Can anybody want to sort of take a stab at this? For instance, Apurva, how do you make sure that your customer experience is absolutely different and superior to your competition? And that is something which is non replicable. That is something which, suppose your competition raises higher amount of funding from a larger VC investor, that is non replicable. How do you ensure that?
I think, Srija, one of the things that we need to understand is that, which I keep telling my team also, is that you aren't essentially selling a product but a service. Now, what happens is that when people are reaching out to your customer support, there is a lot of focus on how, like, should we put more people, or how do you make the team more robust. But I think one of the things that is very important is to also keep zooming out and looking at the policies and looking at how your team is going to respond to a lot of these issues, because a lot of times what happens is and like we have seen it happening, is that uh, at times you say that these issues are very small, this is a very small issue, but the issue with the small issue is that usually those are many in number. So how do you actually understand that these small issues eventually will become big issues, because you will have many such issues coming to your customer support? For example, imagine shopping on these days q-commerce is making a lot of there's a lot of buzz around q-commerce. Now imagine a wrong product being shipped to you, and then you reaching out to their customer support, and then they tell you that sorry, this is not a problem, or your products can't be exchanged, or it can't be returned. Now that is very important. So you may put 100 people there on your customer support. You may have whatever artificial intelligence you want to, whatever product you want to get empower your team with, but the underlying policies need to be in place, and they need to be robust, so that the people on the front are able to seamlessly execute what you want them to solve.
Thanks for that, Apurva. You basically pointed out this entire dichotomy of linearity, essentially, that even if you have 100 people, these smaller issues, when it comes from a lot number of people, these become larger issues. So how do you solve them at the root? And of course, AI can come to the fore as a great help. If there's one industry which AI cannot really transform, that is only the hairdressing industry, I feel, because AI practically has reached everywhere, every industry. And I have to quote Andrew Ng into this, that AI is the engine that will run the world. Uh, I think before I get this critical aspect of hyper personalization, which Vasu clearly raised in terms of the me culture, how much do you know me? We have to understand AI and AI in customer experience, which is becoming so important to understand, because how do you actually solve those problems at scale? And our natural progression really is that is AI the answer? Because what AI brings to you is sophistication. It tells you that a sophisticated answer to those problems that you're facing. And for instance, we are now also seeing chatbots that are emotionally intelligent and can predict customer moods based on punctuation, with customers also reporting that they are more willing to interact with the bot on simple issues. What do you really think this means for the future of customer service? Is AI the holy grail that we were all looking for when it comes to solving customer service problems? Perhaps, Bhushan, you could take a stab at that, and I would also want to know the view of other panelists on this.
Sure. So, if we simplify it, the customer's expectation is pretty simple, right? They just want the problem to be solved. Now, how do you solve it is what it all comes down to. AI certainly can solve, I think, as we automate further and machines intelligently understand resolve problems effectively, things will get better for sure. We've got to be a little mindful here, right? AI is a bit of a buzzword as well. And the reason I say this is a lot of what we call AI is very English language centric, right? So if you think about it, India and China collectively, make up about 30% of the world's population, right? China is, of course, a separate internet on its own, and that leaves India. And a lot of Indians, sorry, for some reason it just got muted on its own. So sometimes most people prefer, and we see this data all the time showing up, that consumers prefer to communicate in a blend of vernacular transliterated in English. Right? This happens all the time. Now, AI is not even geared to handle our vernacular and standalone mode. Imagine somebody trying to type something in Hindi but using the English language, right? It's pretty tough. So I think it's both a challenge, but sure, as we progressively start solving this, it gets better. Now, on the other side of customer support, that's the text-based thing. But let's say I pick up a phone and call somebody, right? And I need support. Sorry, again, that it goes. So every time that I'm trying to speak to somebody today, Alexa can understand what I'm saying in English if I say it properly, right? But what if I start speaking in vernacular? So the automated speech recognition is still quite far away as far as AI is concerned. But I think that's an exciting opportunity as well. And I think once we start seeing improvements, and it's bound to happen, I think our customer experience and customer service experience is going to get better over the time, over a period of time.
Okay, Vasu, I would sort of like to bring you in. I think Apurva also mentioned that, and I think was sort of very well sort of pointed out by him that Shija's small problems are the ones that can escalate and become larger problems. So his appeal to his team is not to take the smaller problems very lightly, because those, if they come from a lot number of people, become large problems. So he, as a vice president in his company who is entrusted with the task of solving for those, goes to AI. Now, AI is another problem. In a country as diverse as ours, forget languages, look at the number of dialects that we are dealing with. And then, of course, you have this amazing language called the Hinglish, which is the fusion that we've created called Hindi plus English. Can AI become as intelligent to solve for this? And do you really think, Vasu, that how will customers react to AI in customer experience? And how have their attitude really changed towards this in recent years? How open we really are for this chatbot, intelligent chatbot on the other side, really solving for problems? And can hyper personalization and AI go in tandem? Because you spoke about the fact that does this person know me? But what if I speak English and Apurv is somebody who can only speak sophisticated English, and Bhushan is somebody who can only speak Marathi. Can AI solve for hyper personalization also? Yes, Vasu.
Thanks so much, Srija. I think, Bhushan very clearly said about what's capable and what are the challenges there. But I also would like to say that, today, the way it is, chatbots, multilingual is still a challenge. There's a lot of work that's going on. Globally, there's a lot of work going on. One of our partners just launched a chatbot which can support 40 different languages worldwide. But when it comes to India, we have not 40, but maybe 400 different dialects that we speak about. Every 10 kilometers, the dialect changes. The way that we pronounce certain words changes every now and then. So chatbots, in my view, are very, very good wherever the interactions are simple, wherever the use cases are very, very simple, very small. And I think wherever there is a complex interaction or a complex use case, there should be a handoff to a live agent who can take that up. Now, uh, if we analyze, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here would have done that, the number of requests that come into a contact center, almost 50 to 60% are usually for simple requests saying, what's happened to my order, what's your refund policy, or what's the so and so policy, kind of these things. Now, these can be deflected to a chatbot, the simple ones, so that the agent's time can be released from doing these simple things, and they can start concentrating on some more complex use cases. So that's number one that to do. And I would like to break this chatbot or the AI stuff into two aspects. One is on the customer side. The second is on the internal, the agent side, who's supporting the customer as they move forward into this. On the customer side, it's a chatbot. Customers would love to interact with them because today, if I want to contact somebody on a phone, it's so much of time that gets wasted on those IVR calls where you're waiting on this music, making some pressing some buttons and waiting for somebody to pick up, and always continue to listen your X number in the queue, and you'll wait, and then when you reach there, you need to speak about yourself and repeat about yourself. And for God forsake, if the call gets disconnected, then you repeat again, right? Because this time it's a new person who's picked up that call. It's not that it's the same person who's picked up that call. So with chatbots, what can happen is, you get instant response. There is somebody who's attending to you on the first instance itself. You can create a customer journey in a way that you can capture a lot more information of the customer, and at a point of time, you need to hand over to an agent. The entire conversation can be handed over to him in terms of what was spoken in the past. So what the customers love about it is, they don't need to repeat themselves, right? And by the time the agent is picked up, the agent knows him so well that the agent can actually look at the entire history and say, okay, I know that you have come to me for this problem. Can I solve it? So that is a very good impression or an experience with a customer. On the agent side, what can AI do? It actually helps him improve his productivity. So what does the productivity mean? If I am able to surface all that information that the agent wants to be able to serve his customer, I can provide that to him, number one. Number two, can I make his life easier? That means the response has to go. Can I surface those responses automatically depending on whatever is the content that's been typed in already? Fantastic. So AI ML can help people, the agent. It also help in ability to respond quickly. Something can be written or typed automatically for him in terms of macros or something like that, right? So what it is doing, it is resulting in lesser wait times and of faster resolution times or higher satisfaction times. Now, in my view, chatbots can do a lot much thing, but I think complex use cases and multilingual can wait for some time because there's a lot of research still going on and a lot of work needs to be done. And for it to do much more complex things, we need to integrate the backend systems also. For example, I want to give an example of one of my experiences with one of the media, I would say a broadband company. I wanted to take their connection because they had a DTH, they had broadband, and they also had a landline, right? So I fill the form, I give it to them, and they promised 24 hours connection in 24 hours. I didn't get it. So I tried to reach out to them. He said, application form. That person who took that application, he says, no, it's already registered. Here is your confirmation number. And then I send a mail. The response is somebody will reach out to you in some time. So this happened for 2 days, and finally, I through some contacts I found out who heads the region. I reached out to the gentleman. I said, my connection was supposed to go live in 24 hours, but it's 96 hours, and I still don't have it. Oh, did you buy that so and so plan? I said, yes, I did buy on so. Okay, let me come back to you. But the thing is, it's not that they don't know me as an organization. They knew me, but that knowing me was there in one system somewhere hidden. It was not integrated with the rest of the system, so it is not visible to the person who's serving me at that point of time. So when I say they need to know me, I'm saying integrating these backend systems and providing this information about me to the agent is the most important thing. And as long as we can do that, I mean, any of these technologies will be able to help us.
So basically, your viewpoint essentially is that AI is essentially meant for perhaps more simple use cases.
At the moment, yes.
Complexity and multilinguality can sort of wait for a while. So if I were to ask you then, Vasu, where does the future of customer experience really lie when you have large e-commerce companies which are undergoing so many transactions? For instance, you have a big billion sale, for instance, and there's so many. These are very large consumer-facing companies, and you also spoke about trust and transparency. How frustrated will I be as a customer when I'm still speaking to a bot, the AI, who is not able to understand my grievance? And on the one hand, is a large scale, this unicorn who is interested in only getting more and more transactions per minute or say per second. So where is the customer experience connect here? I see this completely disconnected in a more practical environment. Help me understand this then.
See, today I'd like to answer that with a couple of statistics. About 90% of the customers expect personalization each and every time that they reach out. Okay, and about 90% of the customers do not want to repeat themselves. While at the same time, 91% of the customers want to interact with a bot. Right. So with all these aspects, there is an intent both from the customer side and also on the company side to be able to solve this. Can we solve it in real time, in short term? Yes, there are technologies available for you to solve that. You can actually surface all this information to the agent to be able to serve him better. Is the information available? Yes, the information is available. Can the AI or the chatbot handle that? To a great extent, yes. But with the language challenges that we have within the country, I think the chatbot with multilingual can wait. That's what I would say.
We have spent some time on understanding the AI and customer experience, and I think some interesting ideas did come to the fore. We need to talk about hyper personalization here, and I think that's the natural progression because all of us spoke about this, understanding the me phenomenon. Who is this customer? And like Vasu also mentioned, that the data and trends really show that customers prefer that the on the other side the technology knows about me, my profile, my problems, and they don't want customers repeating themselves. So that essentially is bringing on the era of hyper personalization, where I'm expecting that if I'm doing business with MobiQuick, if I'm doing business with say a Paytm or any other vendor, they know who Shrija is, they know who Vasu is, and they have enough history about my profiling, and they talk to me as an evolved agent or as an evolved vendor. So, Prasenjit, my question to you really is that you have been listening to your fellow panelists patiently, and I think it's an important aspect that I want to discuss this with you. Is hyper personalization is gaining traction in as a customer experience trend in 2022, and we also spoke about that. How can AI be capitalized on to deepen the connection between organizations and customers? So I want to understand from you this entire bit in hyper personalization and what really is your view in that.
Right. Pertinent question, Srija. In fact, before I start, I want to say that for a more better customer experience, more of hyper personalization, there are two aspects. One is definitely the technology side, which is the back end. Okay, what you are using, what kind of coding you are doing. Okay, how light is your app. The other part is definitely the visualization part. Okay, which if you have more of a simplified visualization, a visualization which a consumer, a customer who is using it, who is trying to reach through that to your organization, how simple is that? How fast he can reach out? Okay, so visualization and the simplest form of communication, okay, is the key for a customer experience. Okay, back end you can have many kind of technologies which can be brought in. So AI continues to gain popularity now year on year for organization, majorly because for business development. Okay, a customer experience or a hyper personalization, what we are talking about. Okay, how can we do a branding of my entire organization? Okay, because I'm talking from a IT company point of view. Okay, uh, what kind of customer relationships can I build through AI? Okay, and how can I have a very, very close connect? When I talk about close connect, okay, earlier for any kind of a large organization to do business, it was more of a B2B, but nowadays we say that B2B to C. Okay, because for any kind of a large enterprise business also, we take into account n is equal to 1, which is the last one single customer has to be mapped. Okay, his experience has to be mapped. His uh, his uh, his usage trend has to be mapped. Okay, then only we can actually give an experience for him in future. Earlier, suppose any kind of organization used to go for any application, okay, they bought an application. The organization who is actually developing and selling that application into to a large enterprise, they were hardly bothered, or they did not knew that out of the 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 employees who will be using that application, who is having the right, means what kind of usage they are doing, okay, what are they using for, okay, what is they need by using that, okay. So that kind of the last mile, reaching to the last mile and finding out that what my last endpoint customer is doing, then that actually brings in the next level of customer experience, okay, because the data which we are collecting through such kind of deployment of such kind of projects, okay, when we get those data and actually we do a classification of data and try to run analytics on top of that. And now when we talk about analytics, earlier it was more of a standard analytics which people used to run. Now with the advent of AI, wherein there's a continuous improvement of the reading or understanding the data which is continuously flowing into my data lake, okay, and what I need to give back in future, okay. So uh, as per the international surveys, what I understand that the usage of AI ML will increase by somewhere around 33% in this year or next year. Okay, that's what the trend we are looking for. Okay, and definitely one of the area where we can, suppose I'm talking about the business development. Okay, can I develop an application which is sitting on a end customer, for an enterprise end customer mobility device? It may be a tab, it may be a mobile device, and can I map what is the kind of requirement that person? So for example, I need to sell my products. So suppose I create an app and which are used by many people in the IT department of organization. Now whenever they need a particular kind of product, or they need a particular kind of service, okay, can they use my app to search it? Just for example, I need something to be bought online. Immediately I refer to, for example, Amazon. I go to Amazon and see that what is the cost of that product. Is that product available? Okay, so if they want to go for any kind of IT deployment, any kind of IT product or service, can they use my platform, my application? Okay, and if they find it's fine, or else can my application throw me back the data? What is the search pattern of the people in this particular organization? Okay, what are they
So
searching for?
thanks for that, Prasenjit. Thanks for that. I think you spoke about the AI and what the research estimates say. It's been a pretty interesting conversation so far. We understood what the post COVID consumer looks like. We also spoke about what the customer expectations and why they have increased so manifold. We began this conversation about the challenges of organization establishing transparency and trust. Then we spoke about hyper personalization, AI. Now, the question really becomes, and I come to you now, Purv, what happens to this image of a call center? Is a call center still relevant in 2025? And I ask you this question at a time when there's avalanche of capital flowing into consumer companies, digital companies, where all of you are pitching to the VC investor that we want great customer experience. And do you think that that image of me calling that customer center will still be there, the customer call center in 2025? Number one. And second, that question is to also others on the panelist. If I'm a senior CXO level person in my organization and I am deciding the budget in the beginning of the financial year, how will I distribute or allocate my budget to AI in customer experiences versus something which is linear and manual? I think these are two pretty interesting questions, and we should definitely spend time on that. I'll begin with you, Apoor. What do you think? Yes.
See, I think Shrija, a lot of it also depends on the consumers. While we want to adopt a particular system and we want to have a lot of automated responses, but at the same time we also need to understand that the kind of people that are coming into the digital ecosystem are the kind of people that may need a little bit more attention. So of course, like I mentioned earlier, also some of the issues, the smaller issues, can be solved with a lot of automation. But I think that at least there has to be a transition uh, uh, into you know in like we can definitely not do without a customer support. In my view, we should. It's it's a very basic way to course correct, and a lot of you have a lot of people who actually feel comfortable in interacting uh, with somebody on the other side, especially in our business, because we are in the payment space, and there are times when people want to understand a little bit more about how safe is their money, and so
Dealing with money, and that's where the grievances come in. I'll come to you now, Vasu. What really is your prediction answer in this? But let's hear from other entrepreneurs here. From Bizongo's perspective, I think that's a good idea. What really do you think? Apurva said that perhaps the call center is not going anywhere anytime soon. Maybe the chunk of the simpler problems can be solved by AI and more automated systems. But because he's in the business of dealing with money, people want to speak to a human on the other end. What is your sense?
Yeah, so Shaja, I think the way Apoorv mentioned, and in fact Vasu also mentioned some time back, right? There will always be the repetitive problem, and there will always be the complex problem which actually needs some human touch, right? So I'll talk about my experience when I interacted with the product-driven customer success at the first time. It was my experience when there was an issue which happened while I was booking my ride, and I just went on the product, said that this is the issue, and the product solved that problem, right? So I think there will always be a product-driven customer success or a customer service, but there will always be a transition to that, right? Now, if we talk about it a bit in detail, you know, there were days when we used to have customer service as a reactive methodology, right? Somebody used to call me and tell me that this is the problem, and then we used to solve it. It has to be proactive in today's world, right? It has to be super proactive in order to understand customer problem in the right way and solve it proactively. And a human will not be able to do it, right? We will definitely have to have a lot of data, a lot of AI, a lot of machine learning, which definitely will take a step and solve these problem for the customer. So what I believe that there will be a proactive product driven team, right, which will talk to customer through the chatbots, through the multiple channels, and will solve those problems on daily basis for those customers, right? yes, there will be some complex problem wherein there will be human touch will be required. And I think that has to be solved by somebody who will be able to personalize more with the customer, who actually can work on the collected data through the chatbots and through the other channels. Uh, and it will definitely give him a leverage to solve the problem more effectively. But I still think that a orthodox or a conventional calls contact center may not be very effective in 2025, as you were asking.
Okay, so we have divergence. Apurv is putting his money on the fact that call center would still be there, and here is what somebody is saying that perhaps that idea will vanish by 2025. Gentlemen, my question really is that we're talking about India as a huge opportunity. So there is one just evolved customer which perhaps uses an Uber and still is pretty comfortable with the fact that there is no customer call center number. Even if my money gets stuck, I'll send them an email. And perhaps there's some bit of trust or transparency, or the fact that there's a global organization. We know that my money will be refunded. Still, at times, most of us are frustrated also, and we are dealing with them on Twitter and social media platform. That's number one. But the second fact is that you also have this huge building for Bharat, right? Which perhaps I'm not discounting that they're not necessarily so evolved. But do you think that how sort of comforted they are not to see a call center number in dealing with the product or service for the first time when there's no number on the other hand to call? In fact, these days on websites and apps, there's not even a human contact email. It says info@xyz.com. And the worst is there are also email and uh, these blank mail options that you type your query and will revert to you in 24 hours and 48 hours. So are these not antithesis to customer experience in the pursuit of growing too fast without manual intervention? So on one hand you want to grow automated, completely digitally, and on the other hand you also want to ensure customer experience. Yes, Vasu, question for you. The one is the building for Bharat and how comforted one will be. Yeah. See,
You know,
you are the customer experience person here, so all the difficult questions definitely have to come to you.
no,
Yes.
welcome. Thank you so much, Srija. It's a great opportunity for me to share some of my thoughts as well. See, those forms that you see on the websites where you say that you can enter and then you'll get some response back in 24 hours, and or you don't have any human intervention at certain point of time. Without the email address, it's just this info at all. These are good techniques to be able to deflect the simple questions away from the contact center. Because remember one thing, the contact center, when the contact center is serving you, that is your costliest uh, channel that you're serving, right? Because there's a human, there is a cost, real estate cost, and everything else. So if a problem can be solved by self-service, a problem can be solved by diverting the customer to articles or to information that is available on my website, which can be solved by himself. That's a methodology, or that's a method that companies are that employing, because you can deflect almost 50 to 60% of your queries that are coming into your contact center. Leave that contact center for solving the biggest and the complex of the problems. And that's what we tend to achieve by doing this. And as a technology vendor, we also provide that kind of solution there to all our customers. To the extent that a lot of companies even have started creating their own user communities. So some of those queries can be solved by the user community, the users among themselves, rather than even getting resolved by the agent who's sitting on the other side of the customer, right? So that there is a camaraderie among the users. They build their own knowledge base. It's getting solved. Of course, it gets moderated as well, but they're able to solve themselves. And then only when there is a complex one, they're going to the company and saying, "Okay, help me solve this," right? And your other question around the contact center being relevant in 2025, I think I will go with Apoorv, because contact center will be there. It may be in a completely different form, right? And in terms of human being there, humans will be there. But what customer will look forward to, or always look forward to, is empathy. And that empathy can only be brought in by humans there, right? So there will be a blend of human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Both will be there. The amount of investment that will go into artificial intelligence will depend on the maturity of the platforms and maturity of the business and the processes that they have within their organization. So I'd like to leave my thoughts there.
That's sort of very well said. The amount of investment will depend upon the maturity of the organization, and those organizations, ultimately it's their call how they want to grow. And he is not completely departing the image of the customer call center, and he said that perhaps more complex problems will relegated to the call center. They will perhaps take more other different shape and form by 2025. You mentioned this point that ultimately one has to realize that how cost effective the digital customer experience solutioning is in terms of filling up the forms, and if you have the same problems being solved by a manual team on the ground, ultimately that costs huge labor, money, time, and energy. There's some very great insights coming to the fore, but the last question I have to ask to this panel is that we spoke about hyper personalization and AI building for Bharat, investment strategy, but what about the social media currency? These days, companies are also being judged by the social media currency. The first thing we tend to all look at Twitter followers, now more so your Instagram followers. I also know of a lot of executives being extremely active and perhaps in an image to establish a good reputation, also responding to queries on LinkedIn, for instance, just to see to it that the image is not tarnished. At a time when the Gen Z and the millennials perhaps prefer to talk to the companies through social media channels, how difficult or stressful the job of a customer experience manager really is in an organization, because you are being bombarded by grievances on newer and newer channels. So my question to this panel really is that how meaningfully can we solve for this new kind of customer who is approaching us through social media, and what really are your strategies in that direction? We would love to hear from Z. How do you solve for this? Then come to Apurva, and then perhaps Vasu, what is your view on this one? Yes.
Sure. So when we think about, you asked that question early on, how do we allocate the budget, right? There's a third option, which is solve the problem with the product itself or the service itself, right? If your product is working as intended, then hopefully the customers will have fewer problems with that, and therefore you will have fewer customer service requests, right? So you can actually solve it at the top of the funnel itself. So a lot of the money would go there. The second part of it is that uh, it's like a ladder, right, in terms of the solutions that you use to address this. AI is at the top of the ladder. That's not something every company can try and solve, right? It requires significant investment, and that probably that sort of outlay is not going to be possible for most businesses. But you don't necessarily have to go with AI. You can solve a lot of.
We can't hear you.
I don't know why this is happening, but sorry about that. But so I was saying, in the case of Swiggy, for example, if your order is taking time, in the past, you had to contact them. Now you proactively get a voice call, an automated voice call, which says your order is now delayed and so on. And you feel a little comforted as a result of that. From an operations point of view, you would call it deflection. From the consumer's point of view, that's clarity and transparency, right? And they typically tend to appreciate it. So at Z, we have got our problem is at a different scale. We're more of it's not, ours is not an essential service, so to say, right? So people are a little more tolerant. We've got 1.3 billion consumers who are regularly touching us, right, across 190 different countries. The scale of challenges is very, very different, but at least people don't get, absolutely they don't flip their tops if we fail to deliver what we're supposed to do.
So that exactly what I was coming to. Your business is such that there's no luxury of perhaps weaving that into product. But when you have something like Apur, for instance, where somebody's hounding down his throat that, dude, where is my money? My payment is stuck with this vendor. You have to got to reimburse me. Perhaps you don't have those challenges necessarily. And Vasu, he has completely killed your solutioning. He said that it is not necessarily needed. The external solutioning, you can build that into product itself. And he said that AI is top of the ladder. Not everybody can really take that. So your answer to him, how would you respond to that? That things can be actually built into the product itself. Vasu, you there?
Is the question to me? Sorry.
Yes,
This is
yes,
this is a network lag. You're saying that build it in the product itself, and so that there is fewer customer queries. I would say that's the
yes.
ideal situation all of us want to be. That's the ideal situation we all of us want to be. But you take any great product, right? You possibly are using an Apple product, right? But with Apple product
Hmm.
also, there's always a problem or an issue with something for which you need to contact either their service center or their contact center. So there will be some things. Yes, the amount of queries that come will get minimized if the product is fantastic. So I'm with him on that. But that doesn't decimate the need for a customer service at all.
Okay. I think my question on social media still needs the answer. I think we got deflected with the budgeting issue. He spoke from a Z's perspective that we perhaps build out into the product itself and do not necessarily have separate budget relegated for so-called customer experience. So, Apoorv, how do you sort of look at what is your social media strategy, especially when it comes to grievances, and how pressured do you feel with this new kind of consumer out there who's also approaching you through a tweet or an Instagram post or a Facebook post? How do you feel about that?
So, Srija, we take it up extremely seriously, and I think we have a lot of attention in the leadership team, wherein we at least the of course we try to resolve it as soon as possible, but most importantly, we spend a lot of time in doing the RCA of because if you have a user who's there on social media and he's escalating a particular issue, definitely he had a pretty he is in, and at that point of time you really want to give him all the due attention and care that he is looking for. And once the issue is resolved, we give it a lot of time to understand what was the root cause that caused such an experience, and then take it head on and we try to fix it as soon as possible. And anything of that sort, I think there is a lot of time given to such issues by our top management, by everybody in the leadership team. We spend a lot of time understanding why this thing happened, and we try to tell ourselves that this should never happen again.
Okay, Vasu, your last thoughts on social media currency and what really is your sense there, and what really is your dispatch to organizations in that regard?
Okay. My view is social media is just another channel that is open to a consumer to talk to, right? And today, consumers use that as a channel of escalation because they think that there is a visibility that comes on the ticket, and visibility about the brand not servicing me at all. But for me, as a technology provider, what I see it as an additional channel that the consumer is being provided, through which the company can channel those requests coming into them, right? Now, why do the question we need to ask is why do they go there? Because they possibly don't know what are the channels available with the brand. Number one, number two, even if they know that the response time on some of those channels is slower. For example, they want to hesitate to call on a voice call, or they send an email, but the email comes back saying somebody will get back to you in 24 hours. But they think that the moment I escalate that and open up in a social media channel where everybody is watching, I will get a faster attention. That's the reason they go to social media. As a technology company, we provide access to the social media channels as well, so that when somebody is raising, that gets converted into a ticket and gets a part of the profile itself, so that it is a ticket that gets managed by the agent immediately upon, or whatever time frame or SLAs that they have. I would say as long as there are channels available, customers will talk to, and customers today want that. They want their brands to be available on all the channels wherever they are working, where they are comfortable with. So it's imperative, and organizations need to invest on having the ability to listen to these channels and to customers from wherever they come from.
So that's a message for you, perhaps, Apurva and Bizongo and Z, that organizations need to invest for this question. That's a new consumer hounding you, and perhaps more so. And I think that's an interesting insight, that because they feel that they're more open environment and they'll be heard much sooner. And some of this could also be false. Some of this could also be true. I must say that we had this interesting conversation, and Vasu, all the questions you kind of answered them. I must say this,
Thank you so
answered
much.
them head on. And but I must give this to the panelists. What questions do they have? And one quick sort of last takeaway before we get into rapid fire from each one of you. If you were to define your culture of innovation in one sentence, what would that be? The culture of innovation in your organization. Yes, I will perhaps like to hear from Bizongo first. Culture of innovation in your organization in one sentence. Yes.
Uh, well, Shraja, in case if I just understand it from the customer success aspect, right, I would go with, uh, uh, as Bhushan mentioned, that the customer has to actually attain a self-serve stage himself, right? And that is one, in fact, I would say a leg of innovation wherein every organization would like to work for and strive for that.
Okay.
The
One
Yeah,
sentence. Yes. So
yeah.
I got your
I think
answer.
the
Self.
self-serve, yeah, self-serve is my answer on that.
Okay, self-service. So what about Z's perspective? We are the chief innovation officer. What is the culture of innovation in your organization?
See the world from the consumer's point of view, right? And unblock them. That's pretty much it.
Okay. What about Moby Quick?
I think it is to have a very detailed oriented approach.
Okay. Pasu, what about you?
I would say stay grounded and listen to your customer always.
Okay. It all boils down to the customer. Some have detailed views, some have the self-serving view, and some of the fact that keeping them at the center. Okay, rapid fire. We are running very sort of short of time, but one quick question to each one of you. Okay, Apur, one question for you. What was one piece of marketing from a company, and you can't mention MobiQuick, whose product or service you use that really impressed you?
That really impressed me. I think like off late it has been the the 5 minute delivery, because whether it is in the 10 minute delivery, whether it is not in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you would still want to try it. So I think
Okay, I must
that
tell you,
really.
we had Grofers last time on a customer experience conversation, and he exactly spoke about that. That how we're going to talk about the 10-minute delivery. So great. So that sort of impressed you. Uh, a surprising customer insight you learned during the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, that's for Bhushan.
Oh, okay. All right. Um, it's a fact, perhaps, that consumers are actually, somebody actually mentioned this earlier also, right? We all came together as a community, right? As humanity, and when that happens, all the profits and all that take backseat, and being human.
Okay. Uh, Gulshan, I'll come to you. A customer experience trend, which is born of the pandemic and which you think is here to stay.
Well, I a pretty difficult one, but I really loved during the pandemic. In case if specifically talk about, I actually loved how exactly the logistics ecosystem came up and actually served the entire country when the essential needs were required. So I think the way logistics and the technology driven logistics has grown in India, I think that is one thing which I would say that has
Okay.
really scaled pretty well.
Okay. Now, Vasu, it's you. Now, I have two questions for you. Number one is that if you were to tell me uh, the most overrated or the biggest fad in customer experience from companies, what would that really be, according to you?
Uh, so if somebody comes and says, I've got 100% customer satisfaction, I would say that's the most overrated.
That's well said. 100% customer satisfaction. And on a serious note, your one meaningful piece of advice to young entrepreneurs who are building out companies, say in 2022, who are obsessed with the same language, we keep customer at the center, customer experience. What would be one very meaningful piece of insight or advice you would have for those young startups?
I would say stay grounded, and create products of world-class quality, and then ensure that there are fewer customer requests that keep coming to you. Keep the product to world class. I would say that.
Okay. Thanks for this discussion. And a lot of meaningful insights came to the fore. Till time I see you next, goodbye and good luck. And keep watching
Thank
Mid
you.
CX Conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care. Bye.